Hello, everyone. Happy Monday, last Maximize Monday of the year. We have a special episode for you, as you can see, because there's two guests with me this time. It's kind of different. You're probably familiar with Tyrina and Cedric, who's both have been on the show before, but we wanted to lead a little bit of a discussion in terms of making DEI a priority when you're searching for your next career path. So I brought two career coaches who I value their opinion highly and wanted to get them to speak on something that they help people who are transitioning into new careers focus on. So Cedric, Tyrina, thank you both for taking some time right here before the holidays to jump on with me. I know it's not like the calmest of times for anyone, so it means a lot that you both took some time out of your busy schedules to jump on here with me.
No problem at all. It's a pleasure being on again, Matt.
Yeah, I
Thank
appreciate it. I'm
you.
back my second time, so I'm
Yeah,
and you got like one of my favorite people on here too. So I mean, yeah, this is great. Thank you.
yeah, definitely. So I'm going to kick first question off to you, Cedric. So, one of the things when you're coaching your candidates on getting information from organizations, their commitment and how they integrate diversity, equity, and inclusion into their day-to-day workplace practices, what are some of the ways that you try to coach your candidates to seek that information out? What are some of the things that they can do to be proactive when they're prioritizing that as being an important factor of their job search?
So for me, I try to really make things practical if I'm supporting anybody, and just kind of keep it from the lens of like, well, what would I do? What have I done? What's been successful? Because honestly, speaking it from a perspective of DEI or representation, like I am actually right now the only Black man at the organization where I work. And I've been in situations where I've been the only Black person, only Black man um, on a team, right? In terms of those efforts. And also just even thinking about the education sphere as a teacher, less than 2% of teachers are Black men. So I'm always just kind of like paying attention. And with that, in support of other people, just thinking about not just necessarily race, but also, other classifications or categories. I really try to pinpoint, all right, well, let's do our research. What can you learn about the company themselves? Of course, look at their website, but we also have to kind of keep in mind that, that's kind of the representative, right? The best version of self on that website. So kind of peeling back some of those layers, one practical thing I can offer is, I mean, if you want to know how diverse a company is, LinkedIn is a great resource, just like for anything else, where you can go to that company's page, go to people under that tab, and you can actually see who works there. And from there, I mean, you can literally see the faces. That's one way to gauge it. And then, of course, connecting with people, having informational interviews, and just asking, well, what type of work are you all doing in this space? How do you feel? Whether that's somebody that you identify with racially or gender based or anything like that, right? Really just thinking about like what values and what things are important to you in terms of how you show up, and how can you basically see that right within that organization and get some information regarding how that shows up there, to make sure that it's somewhere that you think you would feel welcomed, and just kind of digging into it that way. So those would be a couple of pointers, a couple of thoughts just from my perspective.
Yeah, definitely, and sound advice. So, Tyrina, anything additionally that you would say that you try to highlight with the candidates that you're coaching who have that same type of question? How do I seek out these things that are important to me as I search for a new career, new company?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll definitely piggyback on the experience that Cedric has had. I was in corporate for almost 20 years before I started my business. And in most of those spaces, I was either the only woman or the only Black woman or both. I generally on every team, I was the only Black person on the team. And so I feel like at the latter portion of my career, I made DEI one of the most important things in the next company that I went to. And it's funny because the first job that I got out of college was the most diverse out of all the jobs that I've had in corporate. And it was at a nonprofit organization in Philadelphia. It was an at-risk youth after school program. So most of the children in the program were, in foster homes, or they were in homes where they were taken away from, their guardians or their parents. But I just wanted to make sure I piggybacked off of that, because once I got to a certain level in my career, I said, I want to see people that look like me in leadership.
Mhm.
And I'm not seeing that in the spaces that I'm deciding to get a job, as far as the employer. Um, but yeah, LinkedIn is definitely my number one as far as researching the company. As I, grew on LinkedIn and saw certain companies that I wanted to work for before I started my business, LinkedIn was my go-to. I went to that people's tab. I saw like if there were a lot of, not just Black people, but just like any person of color, anyone that resembled me that were in higher up spaces. And then from there, I would just make an informed decision as if I wanted to update my resume and decide to apply to those positions.
Mhm.
But with the position that I am now as a career transition specialist, in guiding my clients on ensuring that if DEIB is important to you in the next space that you're in, we have to make sure that we do take the proper steps. I love the fact that Cedric did bring up that you can just look on the people's tab and see the different type of people that work there. If one of my clients is comfortable, I ask them to go this step ahead, connect with the person that works there and have that conversation and say, okay, well, on the website, it says that, there's a DEIB statement on the website. They preach being diverse. I would like to pick your brain and really know if you have DEIB initiatives, if you do things in the community, if they are extending, their space to be more diverse. And that's really the only way that you can find out that information. So that definitely LinkedIn is like my number one.
Yeah, and let's expand upon that because it's a good segue into the next question, because it's about preparing those questions, because you always want to go into an interview with questions ready to ask about what's most important to you. So if DEI is something that you really want to make the focal point of the next position that you're going to be, to see that diversity and make sure there's inclusion of what's most important to you, what are some questions that you try to coach your candidates on in terms of this would be a good thing to ask during the interview to get those answers and make sure it's not just a message on the website, on the company page, but that they're actually practicing what they're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I have a diverse range of clients. Some are more introverted and some are more outgoing. So as I get to know my clients is where I determine what kind of questions they will be comfortable asking.
Mhm.
So I would say for the more introverted and more like kind of laid back clients, I develop questions for them that is not so like super direct as if they were just saying, okay, you said you're diverse. Are you diverse? Like, name how many Black people you have working at your company. You don't really want to say that. But there are other questions that you can find out if they are diverse as they say they are online, or even cater to diverse initiatives. Like, what type of community engagement do you do? Do you work with certain charities? And a lot of companies, they do donate and they work with different charities. They have like events that they do in the summer, and getting a list of those type of community engagement programs that they do or initiatives um, will help with figuring out how diverse they are. um, Even if they aren't diverse physically within the organization, if diversity is important to them, it does go further than just race. It goes, do you welcome people into your organization that may have a disability, or come from a different background, as far as like if they're not originally from the United States? So DEIB goes so far. It has so many, it's very, very nuanced. It goes much further than race. And I think a lot of people, when they think about diversity, equity, inclusion, they just think about just race, but it goes further than that.
Yeah.
Um, And with the company that I work for, just to mention, I also work part-time as a facilitator at a company called Collective Roots. And the director, her name is Arisha Geyer. I did tell Cedric a little bit about her. I have to connect both of you. But she started a company about 5 years ago where we do diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging trainings to nonprofits mainly, but we also are open to doing it to, for corporate, corporate organizations as well. But in being involved in that company, it has taught me so much and how deep DEIB is. It goes much further than just race. It is about, your economic status. It's about your gender identity. So with companies being diverse, it's not just about the race. Do you welcome gender binary, individuals? Do you welcome the gay community? And that those are things that it's a little harder to figure out just by looking at the company. So you have to ask those questions, about just some programs that the company may have during the interview process or initiatives that they've done, that you can find out, about more about the company and if it's a good fit, cultural fit for you.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. So Cedric, kind of same question, but with a little bit of a twist. So, not just in terms of what questions should the candidate be asking the interviewer during the interview in terms of making sure that this is a priority, but what should the candidates be asking themselves going into the interview as well? How do I figure out what's most important to me when it comes to putting this emphasis on a company's focus on DEI initiatives? What's going to be most important to me? How do you try to guide them in terms of making that determination? Because you can't do that for them. So what are some of the things that you try to do to get them on that path to know what matters most to them in their next job?
Well, I think that starts even before getting to the point of considering, the makeup of the company. I think it's more so about, because especially talking about the education space, which is kind of primarily where, my, I guess, zone of genius or expertise is in, is more so thinking about with any particular company or organization that you're thinking about or intending to work with for, in correlation, whatever way you want to frame it. Ultimately, what I try to outline is kind of a kind of breaking point of like this, I don't know, this vein of two roads almost, because the first part of it, honestly, with educators in particular, is thinking about the idea that you are now pivoting from the education system and moving into the education industry, right? So you got to know the difference in mindset shift there, because what happens ultimately is within the industry, what we have is a collection of groups, entities, companies that are essentially trying to solve a problem. So first, before even getting to this point and questioning, thinking about the makeup of the organization, whether you will, belong, one way to begin that segue almost automatically is considering, well, what solution is that company providing, right? If they create some type of product, some type of service, especially in support of teachers, education at large, does that have alignment with you, right? So if it's a company that is producing some type of curriculum, right, maybe math, English curriculum, if we're talking about that, does it have supports for English language learners, right? Can students of different abilities have access with assistive technology, right? Those are kind of, I don't want to say simple points, but things that not only are going to relate to DEIB, but also just the success and potential success of that company or that product at large. In which case, as an individual contributor, you can think, well, I am, in this vein, or I come in as this person, and this is what I can add to this, not just based on who I am and how, my representation or, my beliefs, what have you, but also my expertise, right? So, I might come in as, whatever identity, but also I have a passion for and an expertise in this particular area that they're already driving toward anyway. I'm just adding to what was already happening, right? So One way to kind of reel that in and think about it is when we're talking about, looking into companies, roles, responsibilities, what are the vision and mission, supposedly of those companies? And then going in, you can basically, have questions around how are they exemplifying those things, right? If your mission statement is to support all learners in, accessing, literature at grade level or reading at a certain point, okay, well, how are we doing this? And also, how are you reaching everybody, right? Or is it targeted? Because at that point, then you can kind of think about, well, okay, based on my experience, my expertise and background, with whatever populations, this is what I've seen that could be of benefit. This is what I can add to this. Are you open to suggestions or what I can bring to the table in this particular vein? And if those things are, a unanimous yes, then you might be on the right track to say, oh, we are open to that. But at the same time, if there's hesitancy, with, regard to your questions, then you can say, oh, well, maybe this is not necessarily the right fit, which is completely fine because at the end of the day, you're basing it around what they say their goals and intentions are, right? So again, positioning, not only of thinking about, yourself as an individual and how you kind of come into a space, but also, are your ideas and your creativity and, and your influence, are those things going to be valued regardless of who you are, right? You as a person of sound mind and body, you're coming in with, your own intelligence. Can you add to that? And at the same time, what are, the company's goals? What are they driving toward? And who is the, I guess, avatar or what group are they intending to impact? And if you kind of see yourself as a part of that intended group anyway, then you can say, well, this would seemingly be a fit unless you get into a conversation and there's some red flags where you're like, this doesn't feel right. Right. And then at that point, I think you can trust your gut going forward with that. But yeah, I mean, I hope that would answer, the question and support some people.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I think that's a great point in terms of the timeline of when you should be asking yourself that question. So, Tyrina, I want to pass the same question off to you because I know you do a lot of that info gathering type of call as well when you're working with any candidate. So, as you're going through, what's most important to you when you're looking for that next position, next opportunity, and they list DEI as one of the things that they're looking for in their next opportunity. How do you try to dig deeper into that and say what specifically are you looking for? What are some of the questions that you ask those candidates to get that information from them in terms of what's going to be the most important? What's the priority for you when it comes to what you want to see out of that company when they say DEI is important to us?
Absolutely. So, again, as I get to know my clients, I get to know like what their skill set is, what they are the subject matter expert on. A lot of the transitioning educators that I work with, they really don't know what they want to do next. They know that they want to stick with, within the education space, but what do they want to be a subject matter expert on? And so what I do is I ask them to create a list of things that they do enjoy about their current position. And a lot of them will say, I love serving a diverse group of students. That is always one of the number one things, or I asked them to try to list like 5 or 6 things. But one of their skill sets, because it is a transferable skill as well, they love working with diverse group of teachers or students. And so that leads me to understand what their views are about DEIB and how important that is to them. And then we'll dive into the questions. That doesn't matter, if you're either you transition to that ed tech space or, corporate, depending on what roles we come up with for them. Is it important for you to still serve that community? I also work with a lot of clients that serve, the lower income areas. And just to piggyback on some things that Cedric was saying about making sure that you don't see any red flags, trying to understand with the company, well, what community are you deciding to serve? Like what is your goal here? And it made me, when he said that, it made me think about COVID. The 2020 was a year where a lot of ed tech companies reevaluated their resources because, and I will say, even with my son was in the 6th grade at the time. He is not an online learning child. He is just not. And so I think a lot of the ed tech companies, or any companies that work with any online learning tools or literacy, they really reevaluated what type of customer avatar, what their customer avatar was, and if their resources really targeted, if something ever happened like that ever again, where everyone had to be home. A lot of students and a lot of people in general, even adult learning companies, you have to make sure that you have content and resources that serve all types of communities. And so I find that it is very important for my clients to work for companies that push that narrative, because they saw the effects of how COVID had on students, how they had to tweak their content to make sure it hit every student's the way that they learned. And so with the teachers that I work with, that is probably one of the things that we really dive into when they are doing the research on the companies and when they're asking themselves questions. Yes, this is important to me, and I need to work with a company where their initiatives, their programs serve a diversified group of learners, whether it's adults or students.
So last question I have then for both of you, and I'll pose it to both of you. And just based on the reviews that I see of both of you as career coaches, I know that neither of you are the type that once candidate finds a job, it's like, okay, great working with you, and you never speak again. You're both very invested in that continued success. So how do you try to then continue to coach your candidates beyond the interview once they get that job, and encourage them to just kind of continue to keep that focus and make sure that the company that they've now joined is bought into DEI like they said they were, like they must have shown to get to the point where the candidate felt comfortable accepting that role. So what are some of the things that you encourage candidates to do then once they've joined the company to make DEI the priority, not just for them, but continuing with the company as well? I'll pass that to you first, Cedric.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that kind of jumps out at me is it's just honestly like well-being check-ins. Like, how are you doing? Like, really? Like, how do you feel? In the space that you're in. Do you feel welcomed? Do you feel a sense of belonging? Regardless of anything, and again, it's really just considering that, we're also kind of on a pathway and trajectory looking into, even timeline, right? They usually timestamp 30, 60, 90 days, as far as, the progression and your kind of transition into being a part of this organization or company. So, doing those checkpoints, not necessarily for me doing like the, monthly type of thing. Everything is more frequent. And just it's honest and just kind of open dialogue and communication, right? Again, I try to keep things really practical. I share stories with people all the time about my own experiences, and just kind of really try to, just see where people are. And from that point, just thinking about, not necessarily just the scope of like the work that they're doing, but even just within the communication and the relationships that they're building within that organization, right? Do what's your relationship like with your manager if you have one? How do your colleagues, are you working with other people? What's that type of, what's that space like? And, being able to build from there and just basically say, well, do you feel like your voice is heard whenever you can, within a meeting or something like that? Or if you did have an issue, do you know who you could talk to, right? Do you know, how to communicate those things? And if those questions can't be answered, then it's like, well, we need to reevaluate some things, and maybe, you just need to ask, right? We need to go figure out, who do we run this, up the ladder to or across the hall to? If you have something that you need to say, or if something rubs you the wrong way. And honestly, a big part of that, just even from my own experiences, that's a lot of that stuff happens on like the onboarding, within that first sphere. And if you don't necessarily see or feel those things, being intentionally put in place immediately, then you might want to be like, well, hold on, let me ask these questions, because I know in some of the greater situations I've been in, it's really just been through onboarding. It's more so like, look, this is where we are with this. If you have any concerns related to these issues, you can talk to this person, and it's kind of laid out there for you, right? And then when those things do happen, if and when, hopefully nothing negative or anything like that, but what is the response then whenever you do actually act on those things that have been laid out to you? And did they respond? Did you get essentially what you were told and what you were, I would say promised, right? In that kind of, courting phase of the whole thing. And if those things are, a yes and they're a go, right, then it's kind of a green light. You continue to progress. But at the same time, I always just try to tell people to just be mindful as well going forward. And just, not necessarily like keep guards up, but just be very, I guess, what's the word I want to say? Aware.
Yeah, I was gonna say aware.
Just aware, pay
Yeah.
attention, and move as yourself and be authentic. And people will respond to you as you are. And whether that's green flag, red flag type of thing, you'll get the vibe, and from there you can make decisions and make those have those conversations. And if those conversations aren't meaningful, they're not serving you, then there might need to be another greater conversation.
Definitely. Definitely. And then Tyrina, same question. How do you try to give similar advice to the candidates that you're coaching if they're coming to you either with concerns or with asking for advice on how do I continue to make this push?
Yeah, absolutely. So Cedric made a valid point. I do check-ins, but it definitely starts with you doing a self-evaluation after a certain time frame. Most organizations or companies have like a 90-day probationary period. You meet with your manager to make sure you're, still in alignment with, the tasks of the job and the role, and make sure that you're doing a good job. And I feel like that's actually a really good time for you to do a self-assessment as well. I feel like by that time, you kind of pick up on any red flags that are going on in the company. And I worked when I was in corporate, I worked in an industry that you could clearly see the red flags if like layoffs are coming around, or if they are as diverse as they say they are, because you'll start looking around and say, I don't see anybody that looks like me. What's going on? But it definitely starts with that self-evaluating. Go back to your values, go back to, the things that really attracted you to the company in the first place. And you do have to pick apart that self-assessing. Like, first, think about how you feel. How do you feel about, the people that you work with? How do you feel about leadership? Do you feel heard? As far as like your manager's style of managing you, is it like an open dialogue? Are you able to go to them and speak about things that you're having issues with, and it's resolved within a certain time frame? Or is it just put to the side because they feel like, oh, that's not really a deep issue, and Tyrina she'll forget about it. But I also wanted to talk about too, and I know Cedric, please dive in if you ever felt this way. I know that in certain spaces that I've been in, I've had a greater purpose than just doing the role. A lot of companies, as I stated earlier, that were not very diverse. And so they didn't really have an awareness of the things that specifically maybe people of color go through in certain spaces. I was a lot of people's direct and only contact with a person of color on a personal level. And so as I progressed in like my 20-year corporate career, mainly my last position that I had, I was there for 5 years before I left. I said, you know what? I said, you really don't have a lot of people of color in your life, do you? A lot of the misunderstandings and how people of color, or, the gay community, LGBTQAI community, and how we are managed and the relationships that we have with supervisors and leadership, it is about not understanding the type of life that we have and how we feel in certain spaces. I feel that a lot of the community, people of color, people with disabilities, anything as far as that's concerned, it is a tough space for us to get into those spaces in the first place, starting with your resume. You could be discriminated against because of your name. For a good period of time in my career, I went by my first name, by my first initial and last name, because I did not want to be discriminated against. Certain things I wouldn't put on my resume because I didn't want them to see that. I didn't want them to know that I was a person of color before they, got to know me. Same with people with disabilities. You don't divulge that information on your resume. You don't have to. You shouldn't have to. It should go based on what your skill set is. So at the end of the day, the point that I'm trying to make is, a lot of times when it is important, and your number one thing is for the company that you go with, that DEI is important to them, sometimes you have to realize that you are put in spaces for a purpose so that they can be more diverse, and you can make the companies or organizations be a lot more aware of how diverse they are not. So during COVID was a very it was a major time, for Black people, and people of color in general. And you would find that you would go on the websites and start to see a lot more diversity, equity, and inclusion statements on websites. A lot of companies and organizations were careful to make sure that they, publicly, explained that they are in support of DEI and they are diverse, or they have the efforts to want to be more diverse. And so I feel like a lot changed. We still have a long way to go still. There's still a lot of spaces that say that they're diverse and they're not. Just like as Cedric was stating earlier in this session, most of the time he was the only Black man that was in that department or company. And so, you definitely have to do a self-assessment. You have to just ask yourself how you have been feeling the 90 days that you've been here. Do you see longevity here? Most of the time when I started a job, especially within that 2-3 month mark, as I got to know people, it's like, do I see people in higher spaces that look like me? And if I did not, I say, okay, well, I'll come up with a plan to make my exit, because you'll get to a certain level with that company. And if you don't see people in spaces that look like you, there's a good chance that they won't give you a chance either, So you do that 3-month self-assessment. And then I also do a 8-month check-in. Mainly because with the data, as far as my company and my clients are concerned, the time frame that it takes to find a job and get a job offer is anywhere between 1 to 3 months. That has been the average as far as my company is concerned. Most of them are on the earlier side of it, but I have had clients where it has taken them a little longer. So now I say 8 months, because at that 8-month mark, you need to make a determination if you want to stay at that company or you are ready to update your resume and move on to a different company. So by that 8-month mark, you'll have your resume updated, you'll put it back out there. And if it does take you 3 months, you're still there at least a year or closer to a year, before you transition to doing something else.
All right. And before I close it out, Cedric, I'll give you some time as well if you have anything to add, because I know that you've probably had some similar experiences. So if you would like to share anything that was very important to you, feel free, and then we'll give you both some time to plug all the projects that you guys do and all the great work that you guys do in different areas here.
Yeah. Well, yeah, appreciate that. And well, I didn't want to gloss over the fact that Tyrina just said that her time frame is 1 to 3 months. That's actually that's not the average. That's actually I would say a shorter time frame than what I've seen with a lot of transitions. So yeah, I just wanted to say 1 to 3 months is pretty good. So your clients are making it happen in that time frame. Shout outs to what you're doing, because clearly there's some sauce over there that you're cooking with. But yeah, I just think also related to that, one other thing I wanted to add, kind of on the DEI kind of perspective or conversation is, and this may be in a way kind of in alignment to what Tyrina was saying about what you might see on company websites and things like that, within the past 2 to 3 years, in terms of that statement. You can also, I mean, almost automatically, even before joining an organization or company, know if they actually have any type of initiatives related to or specifically for DEIB in place within the company, right? Are they working with any contractors, for example, or do they themselves have some type of structure within that space, or that whether, even if that's a remote position, right? Like, are there affinity groups that folks can join based on how they identify and show up, to where within that company, they understand that you're going to have different people, right? From all kinds of different backgrounds, walks of life, whatever the case may be. But, even though, I may not necessarily identify directly with this other employee or my colleague, is there space for both of us to feel comfortable? If we, I can go here and go here. We have our, community within a community, if you will, that also, again, kind of creates a situation where, we can convene together here as like-minded, or, people that have the same belief structure, or, same walk of life, or look the same. But then when we step outside of this structure into the greater one, we all kind of have an understanding of, yeah, we're different, but we're working toward this common goal. So do they have that in place, or do they have, does the company offer DEIB sessions, right? What does their LinkedIn learning pathway look like if they have one, that type of thing, to where there's intentionality in what they're putting in front of everybody and encouraging everybody to do. Because if they're saying, hey, we definitely understand, we want to value your diversity and equity and all those things, and we want to make a space. And also, if there isn't a space, what agency do you have to create that, right? Can you set up the Slack channel for, how you represent and how you show up, and invite other people in? Or is that going to be a problem? Because if you can do that and people are just like, oh yeah, that's just kind of, the nature of what we do. And that's part of the culture where we understand and we respect and appreciate everybody, because we know that whenever you're happy, healthy, and you feel valued, then you're going to just pour back into the company anyway and keep this thing going. If that's, I think at the forefront, and those things are pointed out, almost immediately, which in most cases, if it's true, they are, then that's a clear indication, I think, ultimately, of where you can see yourself in that 3, 6, 8 month time frame, even as Tyrina mentioned when she does her check-ins. You know what I mean? So I just think that those things can be kind of noted early on. But then at that point, you can just make sure that the consistency of it is there, right? Now we're talking about year to year time frame. Are they still doing the same initiatives and things in place that they had last year when they got you in, or did it shift? So yeah, I just wanted to add, those pieces. But I mean, this could be an ongoing conversation, but I definitely think it's important. So, I definitely wanted to say I appreciate being included here, and to both of you for looping me in on this, because I think it is definitely going to be helpful in a lot of cases for many different people.
Yeah, definitely.
And just one last thing, Matt, just to piggyback on Cedric about contractors, I gotta plug in Collective Roots director Arisha Geyer. If anyone watching this, if they feel like their organization needs to bring in an outside contractor for DEIB, initiatives, strategic planning, trainings that are under the umbrella of DEI, When this is posted, I'm going to make sure I put in the comments Arisha Geyer's information. She's amazing. Her consulting agency is really, really good. And I am really honored to be a part of her organization. And also to add to that, just in general, in talking about roles, we also are starting to see more DEI catered roles that are being created in organizations where they don't necessarily have to get an outside contractor as well. So I have definitely helped a few clients get DEIB consulting roles based on their background. So I just wanted to add to that.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely. And I think this will be probably a part one of a continued conversation as we get feedback and other questions that come through. We'll certainly be happy to put together another discussion to address those as well as people gain more value out of that. So like I mentioned before I let the both of you go, I know you're both involved in a lot of other projects and doing a lot of big things across different platforms. So I'll start with you, Tyrina, if you want to take some time to plug where people can find you, where they can follow you, and some of the other episodes where you're imparting your wisdom and knowledge, feel free.
Absolutely. So, of course, first things first, LinkedIn, Tyrina Lassiter. I post a lot of content, tips, and tricks to getting through that ATS, updating your resume. Also, so you can find me on there. You can find me on Instagram at thecareer.navigator on Instagram, and on Facebook, I'm Ty Lassiter. My website is www.tlassiterservices.com. We are a full circle career development company. Anything that you need as far as advancing in your career, resume, interview help, career coaching, LinkedIn optimization, we are your company. And lastly, if you are interested in getting career coaching, I am doing a free career coaching program every month. You can find that information on all of my platforms as well. If you are interested in transitioning careers or just elevating in your current industry, we go through each and every step that you need to take and perfect so that you can successfully transition to another career.
All right. And now I'll pass it to you, Cedric. Same thing. Let people know where they can find you. I know you're also leading some like trainings and things as well. So where they can sign up and be a part of everything that you're doing for people transitioning out of education and otherwise.
Of course. Yeah. So I'll leave with LinkedIn as well. Cedric Scott Jr. I think I actually have my credential on there, the Master of Education title on there. So yeah, Cedric Scott Jr. on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram as well. C Scott Jr. There, and my website primarily focusing on supporting educators in their career journey is EduHustle. That's the brand, and that's eduhustle.co, eduhustle.co. So basically supporting with a lot of different types of strategic sessions around supporting educators wherever they are in their career journey, whether you've been teaching for 25 years, you just started, you're in administration, kind of a full scale scope thing there, along with some different webinars and other resources that I've put together, sessions that I've kind of launched. So everything will be basically there between that space and then LinkedIn. Yeah, one of the last things I definitely wanted to mention, not necessarily so related to this, but I think still related to the focus of DEI in terms of representation in curriculum, is that I am also the proud creator of Melanated Mathematics, which is math and financial literacy content in the context of Black history and culture. And you can go to melanatedmath.com and check that out. And for anybody who is in more of the curricular space, I've done curriculum writing and supports there. So related to that kind of career pathway, I can talk for a while as well. So but yeah, looking forward to connecting with anybody. And also, I just wanted to add that I do offer free career consultations. So people can definitely reach out to me. We can set that up and get people right on the right trajectory and pathway with, very minimal time and action steps. So.
All right. Well, again, I appreciate you both. I know it's a busy time of year, so taking some time out of your day to discuss this topic was very important for me, and I'm appreciative that you both found some time to do that. Like I mentioned at the start, this is the last Maximize Monday episode of the year. So thank you everyone who contributed. I wanted to end the year off on a high note with two people I really enjoy speaking to and connected with throughout the year. So thanks to everyone who's listened, watched, however you consumed over the year. However you enjoy your holidays, have a safe and happy one. We'll talk to you in the new year.
Yes. Happy holidays.